Consider the adoption of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda for the special meeting of council of March 4th, 2013 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Garon. Any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. We'll move on to the next item, which is labeled unfinished business. And it's a letter from Miss Maureen Makarenko, President of the Prince Rupert Airport Authority. It's regarding ferry charges for private vehicles. And the recommendation is that Council consider the request as part of their 2013 budget deliberations. The Council will be reviewing the airport ferry operation, the limousine service, so it would be appropriate to include it in that. I'll ask Council's consideration of that recommendation. Moved by Councillor Carlick-Pearson, seconded by Councillor Kenny. Is there any discussion? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. We'll consider the request then. Next, under reports and recommendations, there's a report from the acting city manager. This is regarding the 2013 5-year financial plan bylaw process. It comes with a recommendation that Council approve the schedule for the 5-year financial plan bylaw and the annual property tax bylaw. Mr. Roden, would you please outline your report?
Thank you, Your Worship. This report was originally presented to Council 1 or 2 meetings ago on February. It was actually presented on February the 12th. It was Council asked that decision be deferred till tonight, and that Council would set some dates for certain key components of the budget process that have to be followed. What we had tried to do originally is we had tried to put the dates to be Council meeting dates, and there was some concern that the budget process can be quite lengthy and the discussions can take quite a bit of time, and so the Council determined that the first meeting to review the the departmental budgets would be tonight. Council has already reviewed the budget assumptions, what we're expecting for property tax revenues, other revenues, and cost pressures, and I'll be going through that briefly tonight in a PowerPoint. But basically for tonight, what we've done, what we have here is we've divided the rest of the budget process into 5 components, and the first component is a draft budget and possible solutions and getting some Council direction, which we would hope would be set sometime in the next 2 weeks. And knowing that the entire process has to be completed by May 14th or 15th, and May 13th would give it is a Council meeting, and that would give us one extra day's grace should any changes come up. So all we need Council to do is if they can pick 3 or 4 dates that they would like to hold budget meetings on. Tonight is going to be long and arduous. There's about 55 slides to a PowerPoint that I'm going to be presenting, so it's going to probably be the longest presentation as far as detailed budget information. I presume that the next one should probably last, as far as presenting information, it should only be about 10 or 15 minutes, but then Council may take an hour to debate the possible solutions and all that. So it's a bit difficult to try and say, well, this meeting's going to only take 15 minutes and this meeting might take an hour when the opposite could be true. So,
right. Have you got some recommended dates there for the Council to consider, please?
If we did the next, well, today's March the 4th, I think that we could probably get put together the draft budget for March the 25th and basically get some direction from Council. I mean, like, this doesn't have to be the final decision, right? Obviously, council wants to hear from the public about what the public thinks about the budget and if there's going to be a tax increase or fee increases or anything like that. But we could pull together a good draft budget for the 25th, and then council could identify some of the solutions that they'd like to possibly see or not see, and at least get those ideas out to the public so we can get a little bit of public information. So I'd recommend that we do go with a meeting on March the 25th, and which is a regular council meeting night.
Right.
So if council, if you're okay with that.
Council's fine with March 25th?
Okay.
Okay.
The next one would be to go through start going through the revise the budget based on council's direction, and also get public consultation. And that might be a good one to have on April the 15th, which is the Monday between two council meetings, and we could hold that at 7 o'clock.
Okay. Is that okay with the council? Okay. Yes.
April 15th, yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Roden.
The next meeting is another opportunity for public consultation. Okay, and I don't, I'm putting it in there because, you know, I think it might be worthwhile to at least have it there, and if we held it on the same night as the council meeting on the 22nd, we could have a part of Mr. Grogudicki could
make it part of the committee of the whole meeting.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Would that work, Mr. Grogudicki?
Yes.
So if the council's okay, we would.
We're looking at March 25th. We're looking at April 15th, and then April 22nd.
April 22nd. Right.
Would you like a motion from council, Mr. Roden?
There would be one more meeting, and that would be on, where am I here? We would need to do 3 readings we could do the 3 readings on April the 22nd too, unless there was a significant. So yeah, that would work. That would work fine.
Okay.
Yes, please. If council would.
So you'd like a motion?
Yes, please.
I'll ask council to consider those dates in a motion. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Rice. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. Next is the report from the acting city manager concerning the 2013 budget. Or is there anything further you needed on the 5-year financial plan?
I think we're okay there. Mr. Gricky, were you going to announce something about another meeting after this one?
That comes at
the end of the meeting.
My apologies. Okay, so no, I'm ready to go.
Kate, if you'd like to come up here and review the 2013 budget. Mr. Roden, when you get ready for your explanation, you'll have to use the microphone so that people at home will be able to hear you.
Okay, if I may start, Your Worship.
Please go ahead.
Okay, though this is the going to be the most detailed portion of the budget process, whereby we go and we look at each department and explain sort of what happened last year and where we think things are going to go this year. The So what we'll be covering is what is the 5-year financial plan. Why does it look the way it looks? How do we build it? What are the numbers and what are the implications? So the 5-year financial plan, for people who haven't gone through this process before, it's a bylaw that provides council with the authority to spend money. Okay, if an expenditure is contemplated in the financial plan, you're allowed to spend the money. If the expenditure is not contemplated in the financial plan, then you need to amend you can still spend the money, but then you need to come back to council and spend the money. So, for example, last year in October, November, we amended the financial plan because we had to go out and buy a new chiller for the arena, and that was an expenditure that definitely wasn't contemplated in the financial plan. The closely related to the financial plan is the property tax bylaw, because the property tax bylaw gives council the authority to levy taxes. Each tax bylaw lasts for 1 year, so every year you have to pass a new one based on the amount of funds that you need to balance your budget. The format of the financial plan is dependent on the community charter, which requires certain things to be brought in, and I'm going to go into a fair amount of detail on that, because that is the one part of the plan that's prescriptive. The rest of the plan, how it looks, if you go on the website, each municipality does it differently. That can be because perhaps the size of the municipality. I suspect that Surrey, you don't see a number in their budget less than 100,000. Here we actually show numbers of 10,000 and 5,000. The historical practice of the community will also heavily influence the format of the plan, and also the idea is that in the last 5 to 10 years, the concept of new public management and focusing a lot more on the outputs that the financial plan generates, and from that's where you go to the annual report that talks about the actual goals that were set for the year and how successful they were in setting those goals and reaching those goals, and how what goals is set for the following year. So you need to look at both now to understand the operation of the city. It's certainly not simply a focus on what's being consumed and what's being used up. The community charter requirements, the first requirement is that it's a 5-year plan, so you need to budget for the current year and the next 4 years. You need to be able to tell where your sources of funds are from, and you need to be able to explain the distribution of your property taxes, and you also need to do your explain your permissive tax exemption and your use of it. As you know, we actually do a permissive tax exemption bylaw each October for the subsequent year. So for 2013, the bylaw has already been passed pursuant to the charter. The plan also needs to show what the proposed expenditures are, the funding sources for those expenditures, and the transfers between funds. The city actually maintains 4 funds. We have a general operating fund, and each of our utilities has its own fund, and we try and make the utilities self-sustaining so that enough revenue is generated by the utility to handle the maintenance and the capital cost and the operations of that utility. Needless to say, municipalities are the last government in Canada that have to balance their budgets. We're not allowed to spend more than we receive. We're not allowed to engage in deficit financing. So if we're going to spend money, then we need to have the money, or we need to borrow the money to do so. We can't have a deficit. The expenditures, some expenditures, they go into a fair bit of detail. So the amount of debenture debt that we have. The amount of money that we're paying in principal and interest has to be identified in our plan. The amount of money we're spending on capital. If we had the unfortunate circumstance where we had a deficit in the previous year, we need to show how we're raising money to fund that deficit, and any amount required for other municipal purposes, which is a bit of a catch-all phrase. The funding sources, we have to be able to identify them for property value taxes, parcel taxes, fees, revenues from other sources such as grants, and any proceeds from borrowing. We also need to show the transfers between funds and the transfers from reserves, or to or from reserves, and to or from accumulated surplus. And then going back again to this idea of the deficit. If you're going to have a deficit, then you have to include it in your next year's financial plan. We've just about completed our financial statements this year, and while they're still unaudited, I am pleased to advise that we did not run a deficit. We have a small surplus. So the community charter, the basic requirement is you need to pass a bylaw, so there's the process of having to have 3 readings, 24 hours, and then the final adoption of the bylaw. This bylaw is time sensitive. It has to be done by a certain date, and there also has to be public consultation. So the schedule that council has just approved, we've afforded 2 opportunities for public consultation. The plan, the next time you see it, will be somewhat different than it is tonight, because it'll be consolidated, and there'll be an extensive written part of about 8 to 9 pages, which will cover off all the details that I've just outlined in our requirements from the community charter. What we do is we identify each requirement in the community charter, we list it, and then we have our response. So if someone's looking, it's very easy to find the information. We also provide operating fund department budgets, utility budgets, and we also provide a detailed schedule of capital works and capital purchases. We actually list what we're going to be buying. We don't simply say we're going to spend $500,000 on capital purchases. So, building the financial plan. You start with assumptions. What's the year going to look like? Then or what you think it's going to look like, and then you sort of try and think of, well, what do we know is going to happen or not happen that did happen in the current year? Then there's discussions with department heads, then there's the community presentations, and then there's the public consultation, and then there's the passage of the bylaw. So we've made our assumptions, we've identified our known changes, we've discussed the budgets with department heads, and now we're making presentations to the council and the community. The assumptions is a status quo budget. This year is pretty much like last year. There's not a whole lot of changes. We're going to be providing the same municipal services. We're going to have conservative estimates of revenue and expenditures. And we believe that the political, social, and climate environments are going to be pretty much the same. We don't foresee a huge number of grants coming in 2013. We don't think that the provincial or federal government has any more money than we do. Socially, we don't think people are going to change too much. They're going to consume the same number of resources that they have in previous years, and we assume the climate's going to stay about the same. It may seem sort of strange, why is he worried about the climate? But if you don't assume a fairly stable climate, then how do you deal with your snow removal budget? It can, in any given year, it can vary significantly, but for budgeting purposes, you have to assume that it's going to be pretty much like last year. So, known changes. There's a couple of positions that are getting backfilled during the year. There's one position that We didn't have a person in place for the entire year, so when we've budgeted the wages for that position, we make provision for it. Similarly, we've made provisions for capital works and capital purchases. Council gave tenant approval by resolution in December for those, so that staff could begin the process of obtaining and implementing those projects. There's no municipal changes. Price changes, we're assuming that energy costs are going to increase by 2% and benefits by 3%. We assume the current year experience is going to be much like the previous year. Utilization levels, are going to stay approximately the same. There is one area where that is not true, and that is due to the fact that the city no longer has McMillan Fish, and we no longer have Oceans Fish operating, and that's going to make a significant impact on the amount of water revenue that we receive in this following year and probably in every other year. The canneries were major contributors to the water fund. And there are a few changes in operating expenditures. Most of these will be discussed with council at the next meeting. So, as I said, the department heads discussions have happened. They're quite detailed. It starts in August. We use a forecast. We use that to develop the budget. Then as the current year becomes more apparent and we know what our final numbers are like, we go back to the department heads with new numbers. So we do this a number of times during the year. The numbers, well, there's funding sources, there's price changes, and there's operating departments. Funding sources, we get a few grants. The the traffic fine grant is still out there. The small community grant is still out there. Legislatively, we still get a grant for the port tax. Service fees, the utilities, the council 3 years ago passed a bylaw that the water, sewer, and solid waste fees would increase by 5%. Property taxation, we discussed that at the last meeting, although there's been a significant amount of new development in this town. Unfortunately, due to the closure of the Houston pellet plant out in the industrial site, the demolishing of the McMillan Fish plant, despite some really great changes occurring, the amount of property tax that we're going to receive has basically not changed. Our reserves still are fairly strong, so we're going to be drawing on them this year to pay for things. Similarly, our operating surpluses, we did not run a deficit in our operating fund this year, so we'll be able to garner some funds from there to fund the current year. So, price changes. Wage increases, they're bound by the collective agreement, and as I said, benefit costs 3%, energy 2%, no provision for inflation. Two very significant items are the RCMP contract and the BC Transit contract. The RCMP have done a good job, as have BC Transit, of coming in under budget for the last couple of years. And it's been primarily for the RCMP is because they have operated at less than their nominal FTE, which is 30. BC Transit has gone through some major cost-cutting reduction exercises, and they've also come in under budget. Unfortunately, when you're budgeting for the new year, because you have no control over those budgets, you basically have to go with what they tell you. So, utility fees are increased. No change in level of consumption, with the exception of the water consumption at the water utility for McMillan and Ocean. And not very much in the way of non-market change when it's netted out after the closures. So this is where we get into the details. I'm not sure how easy it is to read at home. It looks good on my computer. I'm not sure how good it looks on the screen there. But basically, so The airport ferry last year, our revenues were 1.147. Our budget was 1.140. So we got about $7,000 more than we anticipated. Meanwhile, our expenditures were $1,914,000. Our budget was $1,931,000, so we were about $16,000 to the good. Revenues we think are going to go up slightly next year due to conferences and just the increased amount of business activity in the town. We think that will bring more people back and forth due to construction. Expenditures are going to go up slightly, partially due to benefit increases, energy increases, and the final year of the ferry collective agreement. Now, should we stop at each one of these for questions from council, Your Worship, or?
Certainly, we could. Are there any questions from members of council? I'll just keep going, Mr. Roden. If there's any questions,
Okay.
We'll just watch for council members to put their hands up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Cemetery. Budgeted revenue 2012 $40,000, actual $69,000. We did very well on the sale of columbariums, and there was more burials than anticipated. Also, we're not sure what's going to happen this year, so we've left the budget at the same as it was in 2012 because it's not an easy number to forecast revenue. Expenditures, we were a bit under budget, which was great. We think that we can hold the line a little bit, and we think that the next year's budget only needs to be about $4,000 more than the current year budget. Civic buildings, we budgeted $322,000. We spent about $267,000, so we were under about $54,000. We keep that budget at about the same level every year because the amount of work that we do is dependent on weather and on people's time, the ability to get contractors, for example, and also on our staff time to be able to oversee projects. We are hoping this year that we will be doing something to the City Hall building, but that will be coming out of our capital purchases budget. Corporate admin, the actual $7,600, budget $8,000, under slightly. Total expenditures $690,000, budget was $590,000, budget was $565,000, so we were over budget by about $25,000. A lot of that was legal fees. The city is engaged in a program of tearing down buildings and houses that are derelict. There is a fairly sizable legal cost involved with that. Additionally, we've been trying to sell a few pieces of property in town, and there are legal costs involved with that. Next year, we're hopeful that we will be able to actually reduce that somewhat. In fact, we're hoping that we're not going to spend as much this next year as we budgeted for 2012, so we've been quite aggressive there. Development services, this is the revenues that you see here are a grab bag of quite a few different things. This is where our licensing fees come, the bylaw, rezoning, animal control, building tickets, building permits, traffic tickets, building rentals, land rentals. The city rents out some buildings and we do rent out some land. And we also last year got a small grant. We were slightly over budget, which was good. On the expenditure side, we'd budgeted $646,000. We came in at $644,000, so there was about a $2,000 variance there, which was good. Next year, again, we think it's going to go up a bit to $12,000, and again, that'll be due to the adjustment to experience in a full complement of staff. We did not have a bylaw officer for the entire year last year, so there's a bit of backfilling that goes on there. And then there's a benefit increase and also an energy increase. 911 services is our 911 service. You'll see that we were under budget by about $13,800. That's a result of people getting rid of their landlines and going to cell phones. The city cannot charge you when you just have a cell phone. So for 2013, we think that trend's going to continue a little bit. So we've only budgeted $190,000. Going the other way, the expenditures were about $13,000 over budget. And we think that next year it's going to be about another $6,000, and it'll go to about $468,000. And again, that'll be in a change for benefits primarily. Fire protection. The revenue was about $1,900 over budget. Next year we'll budgeted $2,000 again. Total expenditures were $2.2 million or $2.219. Budget was $2.189, so we were over budget by about $30,000. One of the things that happened there is that there was a new collective agreement, and we had to make an adjustment for vested benefits. Next year, we believe that because we won't have to make the change for the vested benefits, that we should be able to bring in the budget at the 2012 actual expenditures approximately. So we're looking at about $22.2 million again. Emergency measures. This is our PEP program. Is basically there's no revenue there. The expenditures we were about $1,000 under due to the energy and benefit changes. We're thinking that it might go up a little bit to $28,000. Finance. We were fortunate to generate about $10,000 more than anticipated. A lot of this had to do with the sale of tax properties. We charge an administration fee, and unfortunately, the admin fee we charged last year was higher than we anticipated due to the number of tax sales. On the expenditure side, we budgeted $761,000. We came in at $753,000, so there was a small surplus of approximately $8,000. Next year, due to benefit increases, we anticipate that the cost will be approximately $764,000. That also includes a slight adjustment for services because our auditing fees have risen in the last year. Fiscal expense. This is a hodgepodge of expenditures. Basically, what we include in here is the first thing we include in here is we include almost all of our debenture and interest payments, which don't go to the utilities. The next thing we do there is we have an allotment of costs for human resource costs when we contract out some human resources. There's also some benefits that we pay to retired employees pursuant to collective agreements that go through here. The payment that we make to Port Edward every year pursuant to our agreement with them to share the revenues from Ridley Island is about $500,000 a year. It also goes through here. This last number of years, we've also been renting space off the port. The Alaska Marine Terminal was rented by us, and we're hoping that changes this year. So we're actually hoping for a fairly sizable reduction in costs this next following year of about $300,000. Governance. This is the council and the executive assistant and the various costs that they incur. It also includes all the licenses and fees. All the memberships such as UBCM and the GFOA that the the corporation is involved in. We code them to this account. Again, we think that unfortunately in 2012 I made a mistake. Actually, it wasn't an underestimation. I on the wage bill, hence the overage of $14,000. We're thinking next year it should be around $287,000. Community grants, council approved grants for 2013. The $1.4 million, that also includes a provision for the snowbirds and also a nominal amount for late organizations who make late application as the year goes on. One of the reasons why it's going to be reduced from last year is that the final payment to the museum is now over. The city underwrote the loan when the museum was purchased. The city went out and took the mortgage, and then agreed that it would reduce the mortgage, took the debenture, and at the same time not charge the museum board rent. Instead, what it would do is it would reduce a proportionate amount of the amount that was outstanding on the debenture, and how it was shown on our financial statements was as an expense. And now that the museum no longer owes the city any money there, we reduce the expense. So that's the museum is now free and clear of debt to the city. Information technology, the small amounts of revenue there. The expenditures there, that basically covers wages and the costs of most of our software and telecommunications. Most of our software and the computer side of the telecommunications, not the telephone side. We expect it's going to stay about the same next year. Parks, we received a small amount of money in 2012 that wasn't, it was anticipated, but we changed the way that we budgeted. We're recording these funds. Basically, we received funds for park benches, and previously what we had done is we netted the cost against the expense. Now we're showing them. We're assuming that we will sell a few benches this year. If anybody listening, they should contact Development Services. Similarly, the expenditures, we were under budget. We've looked at it. We think that we can continue to stay under budget, so we're budgeting less for 2013 than we budgeted for in 2012. Engineering. Again, a small amount of revenue. We've kept that firm for the following year. Expenditures were significantly under budget. The engineering department's been trying to, and is running on 1.5 people rather than 2.5. The intent last year was that we were going to hire another person for the engineering department, because there always had been one other person. We haven't done that yet, and we're not planning on doing it this year. So that's why there's the large variance between 2012 budget and actual of $184,000. And we also didn't recode the manager of public works. We didn't code any part of his salary to engineering, which was something that was attended. So next year we're pretty comfortable at budgeting $299,000. Public Works Common Costs. This is the department that we identify all the costs that cannot be directly allocated to certain jobs, whether or not they be utility, working in utilities, or one of the utilities, or working in the roads or parks or cemetery. So what happens, things like travel and training, vacation time, sick leave, the cost of maintaining a mechanical shop, the cost of maintaining a quarry, the the salaries of the management group that heads up Public Works. All those costs are aggregated into these accounts. We were slightly over budget, $56,000. We think that it's going to be a bit more next year, and that's primarily because this is where you see our benefit bill in this category is actually around $900,000, and you add 3% to that, and then it's a fairly large increase. Plus, there's energy costs involved here. Public Works vehicles, similarly to Public Works common costs, the city maintains an inventory of moving equipment, and what we do is we capture all the costs in these accounts. The vehicles are actually charged out to projects on a charge out rate. In 2012, we were able to recapture some of the capital cost of the vehicles, and we were able to transfer $200,000 into the Public Works vehicle reserve, which will enable us in future years to use that money to buy new vehicles. And the intent is in 2013 that we do the same again. RCMP, the revenues are basically the keeping prisoners for other levels of government, and the criminal record searches and false alarm fees. We did a bit better than anticipated, so we're increasing the revenue slightly more than it was in 2012. We're trying to be conservative, so we're not saying that we're going to get the full 108,000. Total expenditures, I alluded to this earlier about the RCMP contract. We've been fortunate in that the RCMP have managed to provide services with less FTE, which is full-time equivalent. So while we budget for 30 members for these last couple of years, they've come in at around 28 and a half, and that results in a fairly significant reduction in the contract cost to us. There was also an adjustment put through in 2012 for 2011 where we saved some money there. In 2013, we're assuming that they are going to have the full 30 complement, and as you can see, the cost is going to be significantly more than it was in 2012. The Rec Center Arena, we budgeted $149,000. We came in at $141,000. We need to remember that the ice wasn't in all the time that we had hoped that it was going to be in due to problems with the chiller. Similarly, the expenditures, we exceeded our expenditures budget significantly, again, due to problems with the chiller. And because of those, we have increased our revenue slightly. I'm always a little nervous about increasing revenue, but we definitely have reduced the expenditures back down to pre-2012 limits because we think we can do that. So hopefully there'll be significant savings in 2013 over our experience in 2012. The Civic Center, the budget was $189,000. We missed it by about $25,000. We're doing an analysis of the city's demographics to see if we can get a handle on why every year there seems to be fewer people down in the recreation departments. For 2013, because of the drop in revenue, we've decided to just hold the line at $163,000. On the expenditure side, they were able to save a significant amount of money there by redrigging some of the workforce, and we think that next year that we can continue that, and so we've only had a slight increase in the budgeted cost. Community services, the revenue there is derived from our commission on pop sales, and the expenditures are basically used to support community outreach programs. There hasn't been a lot of that happening this last year due to staffing shortages down at the rec center, but we're hoping that will improve next year. Recreation pool, again, we were under budget. Pool management are looking at opportunities to increase that revenue, possibly by changing some of their programming. The expenditures, we were over budget, and that also is being looked at. We're hoping that we can bring it in next year at less than what was spent this year, and that we'll stay on side of that for 2013. Roads, this includes everything from our lighting system, to paving, to sidewalk clearing, to the snow removal, sanding, retaining wall maintenance. In 2012, we included our paving budget in there. In 2013, we've removed our paving budget out of there and we've put it into capital works. It's worth noting that one of the changes that we have done is that the paving budget in 2012 was only about $287,000, and this year what we've put it in the capital works program is at $500,000, and that's a nominal amount that, of course, council will determine how much they want to spend on paving in the year, but we have tried to bump it up for 2013. Transit bus, this is our fees for transit. We were fairly close to budget. We were out by about $5,000. Fortunately, BC Transit, they came under their projected budget significantly, and so there was a huge savings there. However, they have reported that their budgeted numbers for 2013, and so because most of this budget is a contract with BC Transit, we've gone with their numbers, and it's significantly more than it was. It will be if they spend what they say they're going to spend, it will cost us significantly more than in 2012. But we are hopeful, and we may be able to cut back on that budgeted amount, given their history in 2012. Victim services, the city receives an amount of money from the provincial government for victim services. By contract, we have to spend the same amount ourselves, so we received just under $54,000, and we spend about $111,000. There's not a lot of change expected for 2013. Watson Island, we exceeded our budget. We were lucky. We were able to rent out our dock on one occasion, and a few other nice things happened. So we actually received a bit more revenue than we anticipated. We think that will, 2013, the assumption is that we will be in possession of Watson Island until the end of the year. So we'll budgeted for the end of the year. Expenditures were slightly more than anticipated. This was a combination of professional fees and also, I believe, electrical. For next year, we're assuming that it's going to stay approximately at the same level. So fiscal revenues, this is revenue that we receive from other sources primarily. It includes our dividend from City West. It includes a $1.5 million payment from the provincial government in lieu of being able to tax property on Portland at a higher rate than $27.50. Oops, what's happening here? We don't anticipate getting as much money in 2013. Part of that will be is because some accruals that were made in 2012 will not be occurring again. Water utility, this is the one that I mentioned earlier where we think that there might be a bit of a change in the revenue budget. And I hate to say it, but this budget number should actually be down about another $150,000, which is our estimate of what we're going to lose. This is an old slide. Unfortunately, my apologies. We continue to be fairly aggressive. We've got $970,000 worth of capital works programmed for 2013, and we intend to buy some equipment valued at $220,000. So for the year, we will be over budget and we'll be running a deficit, but we do have a surplus in our water utility, and so we'll be fine by the end of the year, even if we do spend all the money we anticipate to. Solid waste, we anticipate a slight increase in revenue because of the 5% increase in tipping fees. The city also is going to be the beneficiary of the demolition of a few fairly large facilities this year, and so we think that we're going to get a bit more revenue. We haven't made any capital purchases with out of our solid waste budget. The capital works, $400,000 has been identified for expansion of the land field, and at the same time an allocation of $200,000 to go through to be expensed for the eventual remediation and closure of the landfill and the subsequent monitoring. Currently the landfill utility is running a deficit, so by running a small surplus this year, we'll be able to reduce a bit of that deficit. Sewer utility, again, there's going to be a slight there's been the 5% increase in fees, and we think that will translate into a bit more money. Again, much like the water utility, we're using money to purchase equipment, and we've also got a fairly large sewer program plan for 2013. As you can see, we will run if everything comes according to budget, we'll run a small deficit of about $76,000. But again, the sewer fund does have a surplus in it right now, so the excess funds that are needed will be taken from there. So the sewer utility projects, these were presented to council before. The total $1,581. We're actually getting a grant of approximately $600,000 for the Hayes Creek secondary pump that was garnered near the end of last year, and our cost is only going to be the balance. Solid waste, they've got the $200,000 for landfill expansion and landfill closure. Water utility, we're finishing off the rebuild of 9th Avenue East. They're going to rehabilitate another water line, and they're working on the water strategic plan. Additionally, this year, staff last year commissioned a report on the Schwatlands Dam, and this year we're going to start spending some money up there to secure the water supply. The dam it's an old dam, and it's starting to need a bit of work. So out of our operating budget, we're planning on, sorry, I misspoke. It's $450,000, not $500,000 for the paving. The paving of 9th Avenue East will cost about $100,000, and we've identified $450,000 for other paving projects. That's going to come out of our operating budget that we've gone through earlier. The balance of those costs are either going to come out of appropriated surplus, reserves, or from grants. You can see that the dimmer streetlight program is going to cost us about $566,000. The balance of $340,000 is going to come from BC Hydro grant. And these have all been presented to council back in December. So, capital purchases, again, a couple of pieces of equipment being purchased from the water utility and a tandem axle dump truck from the sewer utility. This year, for the first time in at least 5 or 6 years that I can remember from my time here, is that a significant amount of money is going to be spent down at the recreation center. This is all going to come from surplus. There's an attempt there to try and spruce it up, and for the last 4 or 5 years, there's simply the stance has been, we really don't have any money, make do with what you've got, and so staff there have risen to the challenge. But this is the year that we're going to start spending some money down there to spruce it up, and unfortunately some of these things are not going to be apparent to the casual user. I don't know if you're going to know that we replaced the condenser and replaced the compressor, but they are items that do need to be replaced. If they weren't replaced, it would be a whole lot colder down there than it has been. We're also going to do we're going to do a bit of work on the ferry dock. It's a significant project. We're trying to go at it as slowly as we can, while still making the dock usable. The phone installation and the greenhouse are the 2 items that were not on the original list that council approved in December. So, please make a note of that those are new. And as I said earlier, we're hoping to spend some money on City Hall and clean and repair and paint the outside of it. And then there's the golf course. So the operating fund, the year-to-date for December 2012, unaudited, it looks like we had a small surplus of about $338,000. There's a number, I don't know if people can see where my arrow is there, but there is a problem with some of these variances didn't come through properly, so please don't look at the variance. For 2013, though, the important number right now is that based on the status quo budget, we're looking at a deficit of about $513,000, which would be approximately a 5% tax increase. Now, there are a number of things that this is our first cut through the public presentation. As I said, we will be looking at a number of solutions that we'll be bringing back to council at the next council meeting. That's now been scheduled for budget discussions, and at that point in time, we'll get more direction from council on where they want the budget to go. So, and that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roden. Are there any questions from members of council at this point? Councillor Garon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Roden. For the surplus from last year, do we carry that over to this year's? Is that included in the?
That's normally what takes place. Yes. Mr. Roden.
That's normally what takes place. Yes, there'll be a number of that's for all those expenditures, the capital purchases that we're doing. That's all coming out of surplus. Okay, so what I do is I try and fund the ongoing operations of the organization through current year revenue, and then if there's extra, if you build up a surplus from a previous year, you use that for one-time expenditures that are needed, such as repairs and maintenance, and that way you're not. I think it works for a more stable revenue and expenditure over the years.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Roden. We'll move on to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Are there any of those this evening? If not, I have one announcement. And this concerns a BC Jobs Fair, and there is one being held in Prince Rupert. It's on March 22nd, 2013 at the Highliner Hotel, and it's from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it says that you can meet local employers looking to hire, get helpful career advice, find information on skills training and career trends, and learn more about the tools and resources available. So once again, that's on March 22nd, 2013 at the Highliner Hotel from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that's a jobs fair in the community here. Mr. Grodecki, you have a motion you want the council to consider.
Yes, Your Worship. The recommendation is that council adjourn the special meeting of council of March 4th, 2013, and following a 5-minute break, convene a closed meeting of council, and that the basis of this closure is that the items on the agenda of this meeting comply with the following closed meeting criteria specified in Section 90 of the Community Charter. 90.1E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. So I'm looking for, that's the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. I'll ask council's consideration. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Garon. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion is adopted. And nothing further, Mr. Grodecki? Okay. We'll adjourn this meeting. Meeting so adjourned.